You're listening to Lemon's Listening Library. Discover the story behind the stories with unique and raw conversations from the people who make your favorite books a reality. Welcome to Lemon's Listening Library. I am your host, Randie Lemons. I am a fantasy author or RL Rose for those of you in the romance community. And I am super excited about today's episode because we know this author a little bit more than all of the other people we've had on the show. So I'm really excited about this one. Before we go there, I would like to introduce my amazing co-host, Kathy. Kathy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, y'all. I'm Kathy Ireland. I am an avid audiobook listener. In my day job, I do accounts receivable for a large merchandising company. And I'm also an assistant to an author, and I'm helping her manage her audiobooks. But book-wise, I love pretty much any kind of romance, but I gravitate more towards the fantasy, the paranormal, rom-coms, and like sports romances.
And before we jump into introducing our amazing guests, I do want a little bit of housekeeping here. If you guys are interested in having an advertising spot on the show, check out our Patreon and you guys can get your books or your services advertised on our show or within our social media accounts. And it's a great way to support the show and join into our community. All right, guys, I am super excited about our guest today. Finnely, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Finnely Ray. I also go by Finn. I write a bunch of spooky gay shit, as well as post an obscene amount of memes on the internet. So that's who I am. Sorry if that was not as impressive as Randie made me out to seem, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
That is just the the surface. You're just totally scratching the surface on that.
Yeah. That's like that's the cliff notes of Finn.
Exactly, yeah. Memes galore. If you need them, go to Finn's page.
I really do. I'm a bit of a Facebook comedian. One of my friends sent me a picture. It's on my laptop and it says official shit poster. And I have so much pride in that. And I need more things that say that because I'm
official shit poster.
So do you do that? Is that just like something that just gives you personal joy and you're like, screw it. If nobody else likes it, it's fine.
Yeah, it's mainly personal joy. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a neurodivergence or what, but it's just things make more sense when I can see them. And so and also just humor is a huge just coping mechanism for me. I love to be funny. I love making people laugh. So it's kind of a good fusion of those two things. Actually, this week I need to make some posters for our work climate survey. And they came to me because they were just like, hey, didn't you make like all the posters with memes last year? And they were Barbie themed. And I currently work at a little bit behind the curtain. I work as a paralegal for the U.S. Navy. So we work under an admiral. And so I made a poster with him because the Barbie movie had just come out. And it's a picture of our admiral with like the Mattel circle, and it says, "This admiral wants to know your opinion." And apparently, the front office absolutely lost it. So
that's hilarious.
I am now the meme guy at work. It's great.
How does one get that job? That's super interesting to me.
So on the active side, so there's two sides. On the active side, at least in my branch, you cross rate, which means you have like your normal rate and then well, not a normal rate, but you have the rate you come into the Navy with, and then you do all this paperwork, you do like an interview, kind of like a normal job, and they pick you and you change. Or it's also on the civilian side, it's just another like government service, like GS position specifically designed for paralegals, both either for JAGs or to work with JAGs, or more commonly we work with civilian attorneys on more civilian GS matters, financial matters, stuff like that. So that's how I found my way into that little niche.
Nice.
But yeah, so my father-in-law is an attorney, and so when I was looking at that, everybody was like, "Yes, do it," and I love it. So it was a good fit.
him being an attorney, did that, like, I imagine you probably heard like a lot of like legal cases and like things that he was going through. Did that inspire your thriller stories, like knowing like the
So
crimes and things?
so interestingly enough, that came first actually. Or rather, what came first was writing, and then when I picked up being a paralegal, I was kind of like, oh, I can understand this. Like, I get this. I like this sort of, because I've always liked analysis and plotting and plotting books, not plotting murder. For legal reasons, that's a joke. But so being like having the confidence to understand it and to know what I'm looking at kind of got me more into trying to like design these crimes, design like what would go into it, and being able to figure that out. It more just gave me a mindset of just like, okay, this is how to design a problem that isn't easy to solve, but I know how to solve it, if that makes sense. Basically just kind of designing problems, which you don't see much in Angels and Exorcists, but going forward I'm hoping to explore that more of the side novellas. I want to do like intermittently between the bigger books, so that's kind of how that worked out.
So
Like
do
have a
you
major
go ahead.
like having like a major overarching like crime that happened, and like it's like all these weaving through everything, and like, but it's like the major thing, the big plot. Is that what you're talking about?
So yes, so what I'm kind of doing, so Angels and Exorcists has been in the works since 2019. So that I still want to keep to a very not simple, and like it's very much so our hero's journey story. So I want to focus primarily on that and explore, because it's been kind of an avenue to explore my issues with gender, my issues with religion and identity. So kind of focus on that in the big pictures, and then in the smaller novellas, to kind of keep my publishing pattern up. Because with indie, you got to publish faster, but the bigger books are like 90 to 100,000 words. So do smaller novellas where it's okay, these side characters we want to see interact go on this little side. Like the one that comes out in February is a murder. So they end up in like northern Michigan trying to solve a murder. And so they wrap that up in that book and then jump back to the bigger story. And just trying to playing around with that, see what I might want to do after Angels and Exorcist is done.
So when you're so do you like to watch like all the crime shows and
Not, surprisingly, not a lot. I like more. I'll do if it's true crime. I will. Um, Jessica, Jessica Hicks, who has been on the show and is amazing, has got me into Generation Y. They're a lot of fun to listen to. Very smart, very well-rounded individuals. They have some very cool people on. And then also my other big one is Cult Podcast, which specifically looks at different cults and kind of the crimes and the kind of sociological, anthropological ideas that go into that, into like what forms people, what gets people to join. And it's very fascinating and also very funny because it's a couple of comedians out in LA, rather than anyone that has any actual like professional knowledge of this. It's just two comedians who think cults are, and it's amazing.
Like how to turn crime into like jokes and things like that.
Yes, and they're fascinating. I highly recommend you take a listen to them because they've done some really interesting stuff on like sovereign citizen movements and QAnon and like a lot of actually very timely groups that like by the dictionary definition you could say is kind of a cult, and it's been very interesting. So I highly recommend Cult Podcast.
I have tried listening to those kind of podcasts before, and somehow what happens with my brain is I will hear like a murder story, or I'll hear it and I will somehow start connecting it to like my life, and I'm like, oh my god, what if they're trying to kill me? Oh my god, what if, like, I will start to overanalyze everything in my life.
See, that's why it's great that it's hosted by comedians, because it's dumb and it doesn't you can't take it that seriously. It's great. I did that too. I got out of watching, so I took a film studies class in high school and we were going to watch Silence of the Lambs, and for some reason my professor decided to segue it with like, let's look at this article about how many serial killers operate in America any given year. And so I was like, bro, nah, we're not gonna. So I watched The Sixth Sense instead. I went back and watched it recently, just when I started getting to my true crime kick. I'm like, oh, I could have sat through this. Like he was freaking me out for nothing. Thanks a lot, Mr. English. I was just a nervous kid, so that was not going to be it. But I can watch Sixth Sense all day. That's a great. So I did not mind that.
So what kind of drew you into the thriller and murder mystery, like as a wanting to write it kind of thing?
So it kind of happened accidentally. So I really like horror. I really like supernatural horror. Growing up, that was especially like really goofy like ghost hunting shows. Whether they're like real, not real, it doesn't matter. They're just fun to watch. And growing up, that's how me, my mom, and my sister bonded. It was always like Sunday nights and Wednesday nights, we all got together and watched Ghost Adventures or Ghost Hunters. And that was just something we all shared. And they're just fun. They're just fun to watch. Like the history is fun. Like the idea that they present, like the scenarios are entertaining. So that's kind of where it started, and then it kind of branched out into more horror movies. Me and my sister back and forth all the time. We're like, yo, you need to watch this movie, this movie, this movie. Just because the more I watch, the more I realize that their horror is very much so a way to explore a scary idea in a safe space. And like you're allowed to feel all those emotions that are attached with it, whether that be death, the afterlife, vengeance, like whatever it may be. But then you can, the movie ends, the book ends, and then you can set it aside and then kind of go back to your normal life. And that's why I really like exploring that. And then with the more murder, again, the murder mystery thing is very new. I'm just now kind of dipping my toes into that, just exploring that from kind of the legal side. And again, I really like puzzles, and murder mysteries are very much so a puzzle within a puzzle, because you have to figure out how to plot this out, make it believable, but also you have to frame it within the beats and kind of the acts of a story as well. So that's a very interesting project that I feel might be fun to torture myself with, because that's really what this is going to be at the end of the day. And that's great.
Do you feel like, do you typically guess like the end result a lot? Like guess who the murderer is, or guess who had a play in it?
I actually, because the thing is, I look at it from, so it'll depend. Like on a normal, if it's not, the point isn't murder, if the point is just like some bad thing, like if it's just kind of a normal like heist type deal, if like someone's gonna get betrayed, like if it's something like that, like purely fantasy, I can usually guess pretty fast. And my wife is like, how did you guess that? And the answer is usually because that's how I would write it. But I think because with murder mystery, I'm so new to it that I don't know how to pick up those patterns. So that's when it's more realistic, it's a little harder. Like, because we also watch Only Murderers in the Building, which I also highly recommend. And I have been wrong every season, which is weird for me to be, because I'm usually can guess plot twists and stuff like that, but I've been wrong every time. So, which my wife has been kind of proud of. Okay.
Does she guess them right?
She doesn't guess right, but she can tell me why I'm gonna be wrong, and then I turn out to be wrong. So she might. So it's like she doesn't get like, doesn't get all the points, but she gets half of them, and that's good enough for a very, very competitive person who is descended from a lawyer.
That is fair.
So what would you say that like exploring those kind of themes and stuff like that was a way for you to work through things that, like you said, you like the horror side of things because it allows you to experience scary stuff in a safe place and stuff like that? That's important. Like I think that is a really huge asset in reading. But do you feel like that there's another reason or another layer maybe why you enjoy it so much?
I think so. On one hand, and it's weird because I feel like I fall more into thriller rather than horror, which is weird. I don't know why, just because of the story aspect, and then the horror is more of a backdrop. I don't know if that makes any sense, but but I think it's because they're just, well, one, I work more with supernatural horror, more like ghosts, demons, that kind of stuff, which always has a very strong religious element, or a kind of a religious tone to it. Even when if it's not really there, it's tied to spirituality so deeply that it was really easy to make the jump of exploring demons alongside exorcists and kind of this this religious organization, and kind of that is kind of like Dresden Files E, and that like keeps all the dark stuff, all the dark secrets, like secret. Well, I phrased that really well. Put that on a sticker. But it was just a really natural environment for me because I grew up in a non-denominational congregation in a small town in Michigan. So I didn't have a very liturgical background, but I've always found it very fascinating. And that's where we currently attend an Episcopal church now, just because that rhythm is very comforting. Like that, it feels like there's more room for the more mystical, more, I guess you could say, more spiritual side of it, the quiet spiritual side of it. Whereas where I came from, it was always very loud, very animated, very getting up and, jumping and all
the more charismatic.
The more charismatic, yeah. And so coming from that felt like a very safe, like a more liturgical background to explore the ideas of religion and conflict within that with identity. This felt very natural, and to add that demonic element, that idea of fighting against supernatural forces and using that as a metaphor of like dealing with your own demons just made sense to me. I guess you could say like that part of it just clicked, like exploring that.
So is the horror side of it more for you coming from that supernatural fear of the unknown sort of?
Some of it's unknown, some of it's just the idea of having forces that are so powerful that we don't even know, like we wouldn't even begin to know how to face them. I think that has always been very unnerving to me. And so that felt like a very natural villain to me, just something that could very easily be, those fears could be projected onto, to kind of deal with that in time with Peter, the protagonist that has to deal with the demon the most through most of the story. Like, he has to deal with his sense of being, his father's only son, and he's trans, so he didn't necessarily grow up as the son, so he feels that responsibility, but he still feels it in face of this impossible task, I guess he has, of dealing with this demon on his own. And it just, a lot of the times it can, regardless of how you identify, I feel like we can all have demons and have situations that are larger than life, larger than any of us, that can be very scary and very daunting to deal with, but we still feel like we might have to deal with it.
Well, so and I also feel like possibly like identity whenever you are in an area where you don't feel like you have an identity, when you're trying to figure it out, it can feel like the unknown, because
Absolutely.
you don't know exactly where, you stand with things. And then it's like, that's scary. I don't know who I am, and trying to figure it out is also scary. And it's big. It could be really big because there's so many different facets of identities out there.
Absolutely. And that's kind of, you said it really well. And I think that's why it felt like a natural choice of kind of the arena to stage these kind of stories and just stay in that arena. It feels really
that makes
good.
sense.
It's really fun to write in.
And you've been writing, and you've been using writing as kind of like your tool to communicate your whole life, right?
I have, yeah. So I've actually I was back on fanfiction.net back in the old days of dial-up. Looking back, I don't think I realized it at the time, but I was also using it kind of to process stuff, using these worlds that people had already created, because there was something in it that spoke to me, to work through different stuff, to process stuff. Coming up a closeted, not really knowing you're queer kid, very deep in the church in the early 2000s, was a wild place to be. So writing was kind of a way to tackle that. And then as I got older, it kind of turned into something that originally I wanted to just be my full-time job, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. It felt like the only thing I was really good at. And it's just like just having problems. You're just presented with a problem that you made yourself, and you just have to solve it. Luckily, my job's kind of like that, except other people are making my problems. It's great.
Now, when you were a kid and you were writing the fan fiction, things like that, were you also kind of exploring your identity with those fan fictions, or was that just more of a creative outlet?
I think in hindsight, I think it was a little bit of both. It was definitely a creative outlet. It was just like a social outlet. That's how I made friends. I was always very weird. Because we didn't understand neurodivergence the way we do now. And just being strange and just being kind of an outlier, it kind of gave me a way to connect with people that I wouldn't know how to connect with them any other way, really. And so there was that. And then the identity, I don't know. I think underneath there is a lot of that, just trying to figure that out, whether I was aware of it or not, because I think a lot of that stuff can happen subconsciously. But as
And
I
I
got
think
older,
identity in general, whether you know your identity or think you do or not, that is children, that is childhood, that is developing, is like figuring out who you are. And so exploring and putting on different hats and saying like, oh yeah, this fits, this is, I like this, oh no, I don't like that, that doesn't fit.
I think it was a lot of switching hats. I didn't have the social environment to do that as much, so I used a creative environment to do that.
Well, and I think too, when you grow up in a small town, because I grew up in a very small town as well, like your pool of peers and um, examples of other types of people, or who you want to, like, oh yeah, I don't like it's very small, it's very limited.
Oh,
So
absolutely. My world absolutely changed the minute I got to college. Funny enough, I went to it was still a small college. It was a liberal arts Christian college, but just going into a completely different world was incredible. Just meeting so many different people from all over, just being encouraged to explore ideas, whether that be theologically or um, just how you see the world, was a huge deal to me. And I think, regardless of where I stand religiously, I feel like that was the stepping stone I needed. Um,
yeah, I love that. And plus you have like, again, like a new pond of people that don't know you. So there's no preconceived judgments, or like, you're not in a box when you go there. Like, it's literally the world is your oyster. Like, you have a whole new, you know, I completely understand that. That was exactly how it was for me too when I went to college.
and
Very
it's
eye
so
opening.
funny. Yeah, it is. And then I've jokingly told my wife. So when my wife used to teach, we talked about just because. So she started teaching, like the real superhero she is. She started teaching right in the midst of the pandemic. What had happened was, we got married. I had to travel for work, and she was like, "Well, shit, I need to figure out what I'm going to do. I really like teaching. I'll go into teaching." It's like, "Okay, cool. Here's money. Go do what you got to do." Like, I can't be there, but like I support you. Whatever you want to do. Like, um, so that's when she started teaching, and something just those 2 years, just we, as everyone I'm sure knows, like totally altered everything, including just childhood development and how schools work. And I love all my friends' kids, but there's something feral in them now. There's something just fundamentally we have not seen before, and is not being properly addressed the way that the school system works. It's not, because we're not set up for it, and we don't make it a priority as a society. And so
Can you give can you go into that just a little bit more and give a little bit more of an example of what you're talking about?
Definitely some of the social emotional learning. Kids have definitely been struggling a bit with that. In terms of coming out of the pandemic. Um, when it comes to dealing with peers, problem solving, um, they're seeing a lot of more behavioral issues around those kinds of things. And then also digital learning, like the internet is great. Like digital anything, I am all for. But we are finding that kids retain less. I even retain, like anybody. That's not just kids. Even me, if I read an ebook, I'm not going to remember nearly as much on the physical book. And the thing is, like, none of that is anybody's fault. That's just the world we're in. But because of the way the school system is set up, we weren't set up to backtrack and be like, okay, how do we set these kids up for success? We just kind of threw them into whatever grade they're supposed to be in and gave teachers no real support to deal with these issues that we hadn't seen before and weren't really familiar with how to deal with, and just said, here you go, have fun with your poverty rages, and no no real support. um and again, and it doesn't help that like we were in a solid system, and then we came to Memphis, which is very very struggling when it comes to public education. And I told my wife, like, hey, after this job, if I need to get out and we need to move to my hometown, I will do that. And then, just because some of the things she would tell me, I was like, there's no way in hell you would get away with that where I was growing up. Like, it was not happening.
Literally get spanked.
At a minimum. Like,
Yeah.
I'd be lucky if that's all I got away with. Like, well, even at school, like, teachers weren't going to put up, like, there's no way. Like, you'd be out the class, you'd be in the principal's office, your parents would be called, you'd be with, just that's not. But again, I grew up in frankly, a richer area. So I was like, if we need to do that so you can continue to teach and you can be healthy, I will absolutely move to my hometown. But then we go home and I just see people, I was like,
maybe a different small town.
I was like, I forgot that I fucking hate it here. Like, which is I'm sorry for the very long tirade about the school system. But yeah, all that is to say, you can think you want to go home, and then you go home and you're like, oh, fuck that. Like, that's not.
I have a theory about that. Actually, I think a lot of that is because when COVID hit, everybody was home, right? And so parents who were not used to handling and dealing with their children, all of a sudden had them at home and actually had to somehow start parenting, as well as kind of being the teacher, because they had to make sure they were doing, it was like a homeschooling.
Everybody was forced to homeschool.
Shit show that just got thrown on people that, frankly, not everybody is wired to do that. Like, I stayed home with my kids for 12 years and I absolutely freaking loved it, but not everybody is wired to do that. Not. And so when the pandemic hit, like, well, guess what? Everybody is a stay-at-home parent and they're working, and so I think that's just my personal opinion, but
no, I get that. Like, yeah, but yeah. Well, and that was a very roundabout way to get to that, but yeah.
Well, and like the masks over the face, like, kids who are developing, they could read no emotions from people, because like there's only so many emotions you can read from people with the mask on.
Yep. So it's just a lot of stuff that.
So the social cues and that kind of thing were lost on them.
Right. So even in high school, because my wife has taught pretty much every grade at this point of high school. Even they were seeing a lot of development, like adolescent developmental issues, because there's just a gap, and we didn't stop to fill it, and so just kind of dealing with that.
Well, and that's strange that and I think it's so funny that we're going to be so heavily on the school system topic, but it's fine because this is good content and good conversation. But I also feel like there is, people who are trying to do the gentle parenting. I feel like it's also a lot of parents who are going a little too far with it. Like, there is just, we don't have anyone who's teaching us, like, this is the best way, and every kid is different and every kid is parented different. But also I feel like, as we are trying to lean into this gentle parenting, we might be pendulum or swinging the pendulum too far in the other direction, to where now it's also creating these kids who they express their emotions so freely that they don't know how to internalize stuff before they externalize it.
Yep, I believe that. I mean, I will defer to you two on that, because my experience with kids is I'm an uncle, so I get them for a few weeks out of the year and then I send them. So and I have a dog, but that's it. And he's got more attitude than I can do. So I will absolutely defer to you two on that.
And I think too, as it is a generational thing, I'm definitely in the older generation of y'all. And so, I truly, truly believe that every generation of parent wants to do better than their parents. I hope that my kids, if they ever choose to have kids, do better than me. Like, I wasn't perfect at all, but I do think that like the genuine desire to do better is there. And so, my generation might have swung away from the, get your ass beat like all the time, or, like nothing, you're sent off to some kind of military school or something. And so, but, we did definitely have the more strict, households. I definitely ran a kind of a more stricter household. I was doing it by myself. So, you got to do what you got to do. So I do think that I agree with you that it's gone to the, so like the next generation, they're like swinging completely to the other side, where it's like a free for all and the kids don't have there's no consequences, I guess, really is the
Yeah,
culmination.
on the other side of that, like I feel like kids, the way that my kids, like what they have to go through in school feels so much more stressful than what I had to go through in school.
Absolutely.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Yes. And so like there's another piece of it, like it's just the way that society has shifted. These kids have so much on their plates that I did not have to worry about as a child.
No, 100%. And my daughter, my youngest daughter, basically grew up in the whole, texting me, well, we're having another, um, mass shooting drill, or, like there's a bomb, whatever. And I'm just like, how is this reality? And her viewpoint on longevity of life is so much different from mine. 100%.
It's so dark. Yeah, that's why.
It's so dark. I grew up. Our people, like, we all had guns in the truck because we were going to probably go hunting after school. And it was like a completely different environment with that. So yeah, it's so crazy what they have to deal with today.
Well, and Finn, your wife has now transitioned out of teaching, correct?
Correct. She just started at University of Memphis. She is getting her master's in history, and then also getting a certification in museum studies. So she's hoping to, wherever we go next, wherever the Illuminati sends us next, we're gonna she kind of adjust and work where she needs to. That's the only way I can think of to like not bring up work, because I just don't.
Yeah.
So I just work for the Illuminati when I'm on.
Well, so and kind of explain, because you do your writing, you have your job, but also how do you help with your wife, and you're a caretaker for her in an aspect. How do you manage all of that?
I'm just now learning to manage that. Some of that is just learning to give myself grace. But I'm not, I'm not going to publish 4 books a year. It's just it's not happening. Most people, nobody can. Very few. I'm not going to say nobody, but very few people can actually manage that. It's not going to happen. I just need to work with what I got and just kind of focus where my strengths are, and also just make sure that I'm also taking care of myself. And just communicating when, hey, I just need some time to write. I need some time to work on this or that, whatever. And then that's the biggest thing. It's just been communicating and making sure I'm taking care of myself.
What does that look like for you, Finn? What does self-care and taking care of yourself, what does that look like?
It is not glamorous. It's making sure I use my CPAP, even though it makes me feel like my father. It's keeping going to the gym even when I don't feel like it, which I've done. I have consistently gone to the gym for 3 weeks. That is a record for me.
Yay!
Yeah. So
yeah, I will say going to the gym, I feel like does not ever get easier. Like I talk to guys who are like muscly and just giant, and they're like, yeah, I still struggle to come here every day. And it just becomes such a routine that it's something you do. And it's like, that does not make me feel any better. I wanted you to say that it's going to get so much easier.
But yeah, I've kind of framed it as that's my like 30 to 45 minutes of just physically existing. That's my time to be mindful and just exist instead of like working either at work or at home or on the books or whatever. It's just finding that balance and seeing how I frame stuff. Also, self-help books. I've started reading quite a few. I try to rotate through what I listen to on my way to work and just being mindful of what I consume as far as books as well. I started
You have
with
a favorite that you've read recently, like a self-help book?
Yeah, The Mountain Is You was really good. Um, Highly recommend. It kind of frames self-sabotage less as in like it doesn't like beat down on the idea of self-sabotage so much as it frames it as you're trying to keep yourself comfortable, because humans aren't wired to be happy. We're wired to be comfortable. We're wired to stay with what we know and what we understand, which was very helpful to kind of reframe how I look at it a lot of self-care, and a lot of even with books, like it's very scary to publish because it's like, well, now if it fails, like it's my fault. Like I can't jump it up to, I'm too busy, or, I have this, that, or the other thing going on at work. Like once it's out there and once like I have a consistent publishing, like it's scary to like take responsibility of that and being like, well, I can't really blame anything else. I can't blame um the lack of responses from querying agents. Like it's more or less me in the market, and that the chips fall where they will. And so that's also a scary thing. But I think it's been very good to recognize that that's what I'm doing when I panic and think about either pushing it off or like doing this, that, or the other thing that's going to set me back. So highly recommend that. That was a good one.
That
Do
is
you
huge.
guys
I actually love that. We as humans are not wired to be happy. We are wired to be comfortable. So like
I love it.
that is good.
It is good. Do you guys as authors, because I know as a reader, I have to shut my brain off, right? Because I have my day job that my mind is full of numbers and problems and tasks and issues and whatever. And then when I read, I then have like all of these characters like in my mind and stuff. Like I need a break from that, from all of that noise sometimes. And for me, the gym and working out and doing that, like that's like the one time that my brain completely bottoms out. Just it's like
Oh,
you pull the
100%.
drain, you pull the plug, and like all that shit just drains out, and like I can just blank it and just focus on nothing else besides what I'm doing.
Exactly. I am
Yeah.
just, when I'm at the gym, I am purely just whatever I am lifting at the moment and the Arcane soundtrack. That's it. Like that's
See,
all that exists.
I listen to you listen to the Arcane soundtrack while you're working out?
Oh my God, all the time. It's either that or Conquer and Divide. Like it's just got to do it. Yes.
That soundtrack,
I'm,
that whole show was I cannot wait for the next one to come out.
I
Oh
know. I'm
my
very
gosh.
excited.
It's in
When
November.
my sister's coming up to help with top surgery, which will hopefully be in October. So I'm going to make her watch it because I've been trying to force her to watch it for years, and she won't do it for whatever
It's so good.
reason.
It is such, have you seen it, Kathy? It feels like a cinematic
Oh,
animated.
absolutely.
The shots that they do are so beautifully done. The music, the
Okay.
storytelling, it just feels very like Max Cinema with animation.
Yeah. Even if you're not really into like video games or anime, because I've never touched League of Legends, but even if
Yeah,
you're
me
not really,
either. And I tried playing it after and I was like, Ugh.
that's what a lot of people have said, actually. They're like, oh, I tried it because of that, but it was not good. But yeah, it's very, even if you're not really into that scene, like it's such a mature, adult, complex, just
The characters
such
are
a good
so
story.
great. And yes,
I'm ready for the rewatch.
I'll have to look into that.
it's good. I would love to know what you think of that.
Okay. Finn, do you read also, or like are you just too busy doing?
I do.
So what do you read something like? I picture I want to see Finn like he rides you write all this horror creepy stuff, but Finn actually reads like hockey romance or something.
Oh God, that would
You
be
know what I'm
amazing. That would actually be so funny, but I can't. Um, I Not to say I don't. I'll enjoy romance here or there. I liked ACOTAR. I liked ACOTAR before it was cool. I was one of those people. I have an ACOTAR tattoo from like 2019.
I
Like
want to see it. Is it like ready
it's
to
on my
show?
it's on my foot, so I don't know if
Oh,
that's
okay.
gonna
All
that's
right.
gonna work. But yeah, so I read a lot. So I try to rotate, especially when I'm driving to work, because I have a 30-minute commute both ways. So I try to rotate between a self help book, a nonfiction book and a fiction book just for fun. And when it comes to nonfiction, it's mostly fantasy, with the like revelation that I write horror thrillers, which was news to me, honestly.
Like, there's these characters that just keep knocking at my door and they will not leave me alone.
It's just like, because I was like, well, it's like supernatural. I would just like, people would ask me what genre. It's like, the show Supernatural. It's that. So that's just kind of what I wrote it. Yeah, that's kind of what I wrote it off as. But then people are like, it's supernatural thriller or like horror, and I was like, oh, I guess so. Right now, I'm almost done with Chuck Tingle's Bury Your Gaze, which is amazing. And I love that the same person that gave us like Pounded in the Butt by My Own Butt gave us like one of the best horror books I have ever read, and is it's just a great piece of literature, and I love that that's the same person. So that's what I'm reading right now, and I'm almost done with. And I'm alternating between that and a history of the Bible, which looks at how the Bible was basically chronologically, like how the Bible was written and who it was probably written by for the time period. So that's been very interesting, because as someone who does work a lot with biblical imagery, I feel like it's very important. It's just interesting.
You can totally, like, especially with how you write your stories, like that just kind of, I feel like feeds into thickening your plots for your future books, is like when you understand the history and you can really put that into, your demons and your good guys and stuff. It's like, this comes from a foundational historical place.
That's what I try. And that's what especially with, because a lot of what the prequel and what the Angels and Exorcists is based on is the premise of the Book of Enoch, which is, I guess it's technically labeled a work of Apocrypha, which is kind of a biblical text that's not canonical for this, that, or the other reason. There's a long list of reasons it might not be canonical. But it's a piece of, I believe, Second Temple Judaic literature. Any of our listeners are free to hit me up and correct me if I'm wrong. I will admit when I'm wrong. Basically looking at the story of Genesis, and that little piece in Genesis that says that the Watchers came down and had children with human women, and the results were the giants. So basically just takes that and just writes a whole biblical book. The Nephilim, yep. And so it kind of looks at like how that came about, of these angels, the Watchers, going to Earth. And that's why Demons in Museum was a lot of fun, because I had used that as a premise for a long time, but I had never, and I had read it before, but I'd never gone back and like built up that world before.
And this is in the actual Bible? Like, this is stuff that is in the Bible, like the Christian Bible?
So the Nephilim part is, I don't have it with me.
The Nephilim part is, but the Book of Enoch is not. It is, if I'm correct, it is a book that did not make it into the Bible, but was
essentially. So it was definitely before like canonization of the Bible. You had quite a lot of books, and you still. I'm trying to focus here, but anyway. Basically, the Book of Enoch, at least, was widely read. It was a widely acknowledged book, like short book, but it is not recognized within Judaism or Christianity as being quote unquote like canonical. It's not something used for like theological thought or teaching or anything like that. It's at most it's part of folklore or myth, but it's not really taken as something that is either seen as how the world ever worked at any point, or anything that we should as humans take as like instruction on how to live, if that makes sense.
That's crazy.
It's kind of like a side quest.
I feel like if they had included that kind of stuff, I'd be like, okay, tell me more, right? Like, no, that's interesting. Did you in your studies come across like what made them keep that out, or what, essentially because you think that it's not the way that they should live?
I think the big thing is, and again, it went in the because I have a annotated version that I looked at, and the big thing is just like the story doesn't really play into either the founding of the nation of Israel, like the ethnic nation of Israel as it's explained in the Bible, or like Judaism or even Christianity. It doesn't play any sort of foundational role in the foundation of this I guess you could say the branches of this tree. It's kind of just its own shrub over at the side hanging out. So they cut it, and it wasn't, because we like there's references to it and people like it was known. It was just kind of, again, it's off to the side. It's kind of like just a side story, if you will. But
That's
it's not really.
interesting.
Yeah. Oh, there's a ton. Gospel of Mary, 10 for 10 recommend. I love that. I think that we should have kept that one. We made a mistake getting rid of
No, I love that, like, whenever you started talking about that, it feels like I almost feel like if everyone just kind of took the stories of religions and things like that, and there are pieces that come from each one that seem to relate to other religions. Like there's a general humanization in all religions that I feel like if everyone could just understand that, everyone has a overarching kind of belief in a faith. You know what I mean? Like there's a higher power, there's something out there, and we all are trying to live by these set of rules that makes our life the best as possible, and we all behave to the highest degree that we can. Like that is essentially religion, all very loosely defined.
Yeah. No, that's why I've really enjoyed, just despite like where I am, I really still enjoy reading the Bible. I enjoy studying it. I enjoy theology. Like it's still so fascinating. Just as I honestly like the Bible, reading the Bible more now, just looking at it for what it is, rather than back when I was like, I quote unquote had to read it. It's so much more interesting when you just let a book be what it is supposed to be instead of what you.
And that's beautiful too. That speaks so much to that religion at its core, that, even though I'm sure, especially going through what you've gone through, you felt like you shouldn't be what you are because of how the religion was laid out. But then when you look at it at its core, finding the beauty in it of like, no, this still calls to me. This is still a beautiful religion when you don't add the nasty side of what people are trying to make it into.
Right. Yeah. If you just let it be what it is, it's so much more, and I think you can take so much more from it, regardless of what that piece of literature is, whether it's religious.
I think too that and I speak coming from very similar background as you.
Mhm.
Like being in, I mean, I was raised in basically a Baptist church, and then went to a non-denominational. One of the ones that I went to ended up being probably on your little cult list. Um, we could have some seriously fun conversations, Finn, let me tell you.
I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. And all of that is just so, it's so like, here's, like that jar that you're drinking out of, like that's it, that's the whole world, right? But like as an adult, I've open-minded and just experiencing other people. Like one of my most favorite, most favorite people, one is she's a Mormon. She was my massage therapist in Houston. One of the sweetest, kindest, most loving people I have ever met in my life, and she's my friend to this day. And then weirdly enough, a massage therapist in, there must be something to that, but in San Antonio, and he's a Muslim, and from Lebanon, and one of my most favorite people in the world. I love him dearly, but I learned so much about who they are as people, and like their take on their religion or whatever. And it's just, man, it's so eye-opening to just, if you just open your eyes and open your heart to other viewpoints and other people, your life can be enriched so much.
Absolutely.
Now, so what, like, as you continue to go forward and you are writing in these characters that have struggled with, identity and things like that, what is your hopes to, kind of portray to your readers?
I'd be lying if I said some of it wasn't just trying to portray that, especially queer people are just people, like everybody else. Because it's definitely, I feel like you get boxed in as a queer author. Either you're kind of expected to educate cishet people, or you're supposed to make this nice, safe little box where other queer people can just have this really safe, just sweet read, and that's not me. Um, that's not me at all. It's just very much so, because again, that's not what I've been experienced, and I'm trying to process what I've experienced. So if I keep these characters in a safe little box, then I'm not putting out what I've gone through and dealt with and kind of getting it off my chest, because that's just not what that's not what I've been through. Um, so that's the big thing, is just trying to portray that, hey, we're just normal people, because people can tell themselves that as much as they want, but at the end of the day, like, how they read and how they interpret queer people on the page is very telling. Like, you can say, or people of color for that matter too, you can say you're not homophobic or you're not racist until the cows come home, but if a queer, if my transgender Black protagonist steps out of line and you're like, oh, well, someone who fits those demographics wouldn't do that, then you might need to stop and like take a look at yourself and have a little come to Jesus moment of just like, is that true, or is that only based on what you think he should be doing or who he should be because he fits those demographics? So that's definitely a big part of it. And then also, just, I don't know, I just really like creating art. I really like putting out dark, messy stuff that at the end of the day still has a happy ending. And I want to show that, like, it doesn't matter what you go through, like, it's not over till it's over. Um, and regardless of where you are, like, it can get better. You might not know what it's going to look like or what better necessarily looks like. Like 5 years ago, I had no idea this is what better looked like for me. So I think those are the two main things that I'm going with, like, trying to go for with the books I write.
I love that. It's going to get better even if you don't know what it's going to look like. I think that's amazing. Like, that's such a huge message to send.
Yeah. Now, do you feel like there is a lot of, are you, as you're writing out your stories and the things that you put your characters through, do you feel like you are worried about like how it's going to come across to your readers or the general public, or do you feel like, yeah?
Sure. There's a part of me that, like, I just, every time I look over it, I'm like, I am so fucked. Like, and it is what it is, because I've had conversations with my Black friends, and just like, because Peter kind of ends up being a little bit of a punching bag by the end of it, but there's a reason for that. Like, again, in the organization I work for, I've where, as like the only out transgender guy in the shop or at the organization, like, I've kind of been the fucking punching bag, like, for whatever reason. So I'm not trying to like write a queer tragedy. I'm just trying to show that sometimes, like, for better or worse, being queer has its tragedies, and I'm all for like sweet, soft, like heartstopper-esque, like happy stories as well. Like, those definitely have a place, but we can't, like what you're saying earlier, we can't swing to the complete other side and just pretend bad things don't happen.
Yeah.
And some of that also is just him, like, not opening up. Some of the issues that arise are because he doesn't open up for help when it's appropriate, and just kind of exploring that as well, of just like, sometimes you have to say something or people aren't going to know, and sometimes you kind of get your ass beat when you don't. Like,
that's very
so
true.
So I'm very anxious about how this is going to go, but it is what it is. And I already know. I'm also bracing myself for the fact that I do not, from all appearances, I don't look Black. Like, my dad is very light skinned, my mom is white. But especially the more that I've learned, the more I've spent time with him and my siblings, and spent time just learning where I come from. Like, yeah, I'm mixed. I'm very light. I don't like saying I'm passing because it's not something I have control over, but I am Black. If you don't like, I'm not trying to take up space. That's just the fact of the matter. I'm not gonna disappoint my dad or my siblings just to make other people comfortable. So that's another thing I'm anticipating dealing with, because I do kind of leave a bit of a gray area that Peter and his sister are lighter skinned. Because, just again, that's not, and they are mixed, because that's not something you see a lot, or at least addressed in terms of navigating that identity, other than like not feeling like you belong in either society. That's kind
Yeah,
of the
that's what I was
one.
gonna say. Is
That's
you
like the
feel like
one. Especially if you're light passing, like if you're in that little, I don't like using the phrase because it's very demeaning, but like if you're straddling the line of like how dark you are compared to a paper bag, like that's pretty much the only story you're really allowed to have. And if you step outside of that, it's very well, oh, they're just light skinned, or oh, they're very white. Like, they're the approximate to whiteness is downplayed in what is trying to be said, whether it is relating to race or not. So I am fully ready for that. If I ever get any sort of traction, that's coming. I already know it, and it's just something I'm kind of
yeah, but like
learning
you
that
were
I'm
saying, like for us to fully understand, and that's what's so beautiful about storytelling is we through storytelling, I can to a small degree understand what it's like to be a transgender or understand what it's like to be a person of color. So in a very minuscule amount, you get to experience through the storytelling of the struggles that they go through. And if you don't portray them like how it actually is, at for you or for someone who is in that space, we almost get copped out as the reader because that's not the full truth or that's not closer to the truth. You know what I mean? So I think it's very important to do what you feel portrays it to the best of your ability.
well, I don't think I'd necessarily say I'm trying to show people that they know what it's like to be trans or they know what it's like to be a person of color, but more that those experiences are real. People are telling the truth when they're talking about what they're going through, what they've experienced, what they've learned. I think that's more what I'm gunning for, because you shouldn't have to. I don't believe you should have to be speaking from a point of empathy to validate somebody and to acknowledge their humanity, if that makes sense. I don't have to relate to it for it to be valid and for you to be treated better as a human being, even if I can't relate to it. If that makes sense.
Yes,
Like I've never,
no.
yeah,
No,
like I can't.
and I'm coming from a place of like, if this is the main character and I'm reading their story,
Mhm.
you can understand what they are going through and the struggles that they are going through. And that's not
Right.
to say like without their story that I wouldn't be like, oh,
Mhm.
they have a right to
Sensitive
feel
to
that way.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
There's a difference in the viewpoint of being sensitive to something, and then
Yeah.
like, because as a reader, like especially because I do audiobooks mostly, but like I experience what the characters in the book, like
Very immersive. Yeah.
I very much immerse myself in that, and I experience like, dude, I cry.
Hmm.
Like I have books that I'm like, I know I'm gonna be I get the Kleenex box because I'm gonna be bawling, you know,
Yeah.
during certain scenes, and then some scenes like just like hit me so hard. There was one, it was a hockey romance, y'all. And like this one part of it was so freaking intense and like beautifully done, dealing with survivor guilt and
Hmm.
trauma over his sibling dying. And holy shit, it was so intense and I was crying. But it was so amazing how the author handled that and allowed us to experience it, and the narrators did an amazing job too. But like, you really were able to empathize so much more by pretty much experiencing, you know,
Hmm.
those
Yeah, definitely.
emotions and the thoughts and the thought processes and, all of the things that triggered these emotions and all that. It's amazing.
But I do kind of want to touch on that a little bit too. Like do you explain to me a little bit what you meant on, uh, that you don't have to empathize to kind of be the human side of things. Explain that just a little bit because I want to understand that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of, I'm trying to think of ways to think about it, like of other ways. I'm trying to think of other ways to say it, because like at the end of the day, like I'm never gonna be black the way my older siblings. They have a different mom. They are they are Black. They are not ever clocked as biracial. They never see themselves as biracial. They are Black. I'm never going to experience the world. I'm never going to understand what it's like to walk through the world through their eyes. I'm trans, but I'm never going to understand what it's like to be a trans woman. I'm just not. That's not that's not where I'm coming from. There's certain elements that I might be able to relate to and understand, but it's not something I'm ever going to go through. And you could say that for so many different things, but that doesn't mean that those experiences are any less valid or any less deserving of taking up room, and the injustices that are committed any less worthy of being addressed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, but when you read story, like if you were to read a story that kind of portrays that, if the main character is that, do you feel like, when, and I'm not saying that without being able to connect with them, you can't give them the space to tell their story, but understanding where they're coming from, it kind of helps you just, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, no, I get what you're saying, because it can definitely be a chance to be a aha moment of just like, oh, like that's what's going on in their head. Like, it's not just for attention. It's not just for this, that, the other thing, or like it's not made up. Oh, it's real, if that makes sense. It's just, oh, I understand that, or I recognize that anger. I guess more like I recognize the emotions and the feelings behind the experiences rather than the experiences themselves, and kind of just seeing the reality of that, if that makes sense. I feel like I went in a lot of circles. I am sorry for that.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to make sure because, there are things that I'm personally learning about, different things. I don't know what it's like to go through these struggles. And I always want to be sensitive to the fact that the way that I say something or the way that I'm trying to understand something, I want to have that open mindset always to be like,
Yeah,
okay, well,
no,
actually
absolutely.
it looks like this.
Yeah, no, I think that was a really good back and forth. You can cut this, but that should definitely be a part that I think that is in there. I think that was really good.
I love it. I'm not. If you're fine with that, that's staying in.
No, I think that was Jesus. No, I thought that was a really good back and forth and a good way to talk about it. So.
Yep, and that's something that's another thing too, is I think that a lot of people are so afraid to have those conversations of like, what I just said might have came off as racist, or it might have came off as whatever, but tell me that. Explain that to me so I know and I can understand how that came off that way, because I want to have those conversations. I'm not just going to defend my actions. I'm going to open up and be like, okay, well, let's have this back and forth so we can understand, because that's ultimately what I want. I want to understand if I'm in the wrong or you feel like I'm in the wrong. Those are conversations I feel like everyone should be able to have.
Yeah, and it wasn't even necessarily thinking what you said in the wrong, because I definitely got where you're coming from. Just more showing the third dimension of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just just kind of angling the prism a little bit differently, if that makes sense.
Yep. Nope. And I love that. I love all the different perspectives, and I hope that, even by having that conversation or modeling what that looks like, other people can be like, oh, that's not a scary thing. Like, you can have those kind of conversations.
Have that conversation and we still love each other.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I have to do that. I've learned that I have to, so I do that a lot. A big part of my job is somehow having those conversations and doing that. We have my other civilian, our other paralegal is this old grouchy, 20-year-old salty former chief who lives out in like the middle of bumfuck Tennessee because he just hates people and doesn't want to deal with people. And also, just the conversations it's been great, like just having the conversations and like meeting each other where we are and kind of exploring the different ways that we just walk through the world has been absolutely fantastic, because we come from so different generations. Our favorite thing now is, with my voice dropping from I've been on testosterone for almost a year. Every once in a while, like he'll say, "You're welcome, ma'am," or whatever. And he's not trying to be mean. He's just very polite. That's how he talks to everybody. If he'll just be like, "Thank you, ma'am," I'll be like, "No problem, darling." Just as a joke.
Yeah.
Because we're not, not trying to be mean to each other. It's just acknowledging the situation we're in and rolling with what we got. So.
Yeah, but because you took that little bit of time to get to know him and know that he's just being polite, like that's how, like,
it's kind of an
yes, ma'am, yes, sir.
him.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ingrained for him. Like I know him, and I know how he is.
Yeah.
20-year military service, and then went right into working in an office with all military officers.
And is he from the South? So even like the
He's
Southern people also have that ingrained in them.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, I mean, that's like, it's not even a thought. It's just.
Yep.
I
do that often, and I'm like, especially in a situation where I'm aware of like, this is not always going to be something we can do to people as they are figuring out their identity in gender roles and stuff like that. But I don't know how to say yes ma'am, yes sir, or no ma'am, in a way that also includes like no they, no, you know what I mean? Like I want to be respectful, but that yes ma'am, no ma'am is so ingrained in me that it's instant.
Yep. Nope. I totally get that because it drives me crazy too. I don't even know one. I can, if it's someone I kind of know, I'll have a joking one of like, yes, captain, or like, yes, boss, like something goofy. But like, I don't actually know what the hell we're supposed to say in a professional. Like, we just haven't, linguistically, we haven't hit that milestone yet.
Yeah. And I will be so happy when we do, because I want to like, I just want to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am to everybody. That's just me.
I really like it. It's just, I don't know
even
what
like
it is.
people who are older, they're like, don't call me ma'am, I'm not that old. And I'm like, but it's not that, I'm just being polite.
But exactly, it's like, no, it's not about you. You don't understand. Yeah,
but I also think that is a geographical thing, because everybody, because I grew up in Colorado and we did not say that.
No, absolutely not.
Right? We never said that.
I do that when I visit my dad in Colorado. Yeah. No, it's weird.
Growing up, my mom would say that to me, and I'm the younger. She's like, no, ma'am. And you know what I mean? So I say that to my daughter. I'm like, thank you, ma'am. Or,
Exactly. Like I raised my kids in the South because we were in Louisiana and Texas. And so that was just something. Look, in Louisiana, you can get in trouble at school if you don't. I'm not kidding. If you don't say yes, ma'am, or no, ma'am. I'm like, look, y'all, like, and I didn't even say y'all then. I was like, look, we're not used to that. So give my kids some grace, give them a chance to like get this down, because it is not something that is just an automatic.
No, it's not.
Just an automatic thing. So yeah, but even like in the South, like it doesn't matter age. Everybody is yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, whatever. So
I actually think I picked it up more when I came back. I was an English teacher in Japan for 2 years after college, and I think I picked it up more coming back because I like how polite everybody is over there. Like, it's not like there's definitely a difference between like polite and nice. I get that. But it's just nice to know that we're all on the same page on the social contract of how we're just trying to get through our day. I don't know what it is, but I really appreciated that. And I've just brought it home, which is hard in Memphis because holy shit. Because that social contract is not always there here. If anything, it's just like, please, I am just trying to be polite and get home. I was not trying to hit your ratty car that has a piece of sheet metal at the hood on it. It was trying to get
my husband, he's like, why do people keep waving to me? I don't know any of these people. And I'm like, it's just what, like, as you drive by people, you're just like,
yes. And it's always just like, in my commute, it's just like the one finger.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, I don't know any of these people. He's like,
doesn't matter.
They're just being polite, and it's literally just what you do when you pass people here.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So true.
Oh my gosh, I forgot that you went to Japan. I am so jealous of you of that. That is like, I want to go there so bad.
It definitely don't go in the summer. It's hot as hell. It doesn't matter where you are on the archipelago. It is going to be miserable, except Hokkaido. But yeah, so I taught English for 2 years over there after college, and that's before I joined the Illuminati and became a paralegal. I'm going to keep that now. It gets funnier every time I say it.
I have to tell you what comes in my mind every time you say that is the wasn't it maybe the third National Treasure movie?
Yeah.
The treasure, and that like they're sitting in the church and he's talking about the Illuminati, right? Do you remember that scene?
Yes, absolutely. That's
so every time you say that, like that imagery is like coming up in my mind. So anyway.
So yeah, I started it because it was from a cult podcast episode. They did the Illuminati, and just the background about the Illuminati is just so goofy and stupid. It was literally some French guy, or was it German? I think it was German, like join the Freemasons. He was like, this isn't secret enough. I'm gonna make my own secret club, and like made a secret society within a secret society, and then they got busted, and and so everyone like panicked and freaked out, and that's how like the story of the Illuminati started. And so now I just think it's funny that people think it's like it's funny that it's a real conspiracy theory. And so now I just run with it because again, I just can't take anything seriously.
And it is actually within the Christian world, the Illuminati. It is a huge.
Like it's a real threat. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. I grew up of being afraid of being raptured. 100%.
Super demonic people.
100%. I would get out. Please put this in the podcast because this. So I used to, as a kid, like, because I grew up like we would watch every so often just to keep us on our toes. We'd watch clips from Left Behind because you need that when you're 10. And so, like,
Thief of the Night, I think it's a sequel, isn't it? Left Behind and then A Thief of the Night.
Probably. I just saw clips of. I just only remember I couldn't hardly get through Left Behind. But no, I would periodically, like as a child, I would like get out of the shower or something, and the house would be too quiet, and I'd be like, "Fuck, what did I do? I got left behind." And so I'd like lean out the door and be like, "Mom," she'd be like, "Yeah, what is it?" And I was like, "Nothing," just like making sure I hadn't been left behind. And then I told that story at a family reunion years later, and my mom is like, "Wait, that's what that was? That's what you were doing? I always thought that was weird, and I didn't know what was happening." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I was making sure you weren't all raptured and left me behind." So, think to say I have a little.
And then if you're like driving on a bridge, like you're scared that like the rapture's gonna happen and all the cars are gonna like.
Yes. Fuck.
Oh my gosh.
We have so much in common, Finn.
That's another reason I just like it just makes sense for me to like have a religious background for this series because just that's the kind of shit I grew up with. Like that's the shit I'm still processing. Like what the hell was that? So yeah.
I love that. That's fucking hilarious.
Shit, I'm sorry.
It's not hilarious because it's your trauma, but it's hilarious.
It is funny.
It's great backstories.
No, it's a fantastic lore. It's great. So
okay, so hang on. Because I did not come from this sort of background. What are you guys afraid of? The rapture happening and you didn't get taken to heaven?
That's what So when you grow up, this might not be everyone's experience, but this is my experience. So with a non-denominational congregation, essentially the thing is you're just quote unquote Bible believing, which I could do a whole nother podcast episode on why that's bullshit. But anyway, so you don't have any school of doctrine. You don't have like the thousands of years worth of theology on what you believe. You kind of just onesie from growing up, it just looked like we kind of just onesie Tuesdays, whatever the fuck made sense and made us comfortable. And part of and this, I'm sure there are denominations that believe this, but the rapture comes from a handful of verses that basically says that the Lord will come in like a thief in the night and take people to him. I'm not going to pretend like I actually know what the fuck it means. I know what it doesn't mean. It means that we're not going to go about our day and then just all of a sudden people disappear. Like that's the whole idea is the rapture is people get taken up and then a bunch of bad shit happens afterwards.
It's supposed to be right before the
Jesus comes back.
I'm sorry, what?
Isn't it like so everybody, all the good Christians leave, everybody else gets stuck and goes through all the bad shit.
7 years of tribulation. And then
Yes. So that's kind of what you grow up with. But the thing is, like you can talk. Another tricky thing, this is how they got me and why I probably have anxiety, is they would do this like onesie twosie. It's just like, is this a sin? Is it not? Who knows? You better hope it's not, or you're gonna get your ass left behind and or go to hell. That's kind of the shit I grew up with and used through.
You're like about to eat something, you're like,
No, so they would just question. I think the goal, and I don't think it worked because the threat of hell kind of negates whatever they were trying to say. But it was basically just like be mindful all the time of like what you're doing and those around you and God and all that shit. But like the fact that you frame it as just like if you're not, you're just going to go to hell. And it doesn't matter that you've been baptized. Doesn't matter if you're Christian. You might still get left behind. So that threat was there from like 2004 until like 2009 or 10. It was just constantly there in the back of my head.
Well, and I think that too, in that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I very well could be, 'cause it's been a while since I've read this, but the rapture was a very specific number of people, or
it depends on what flavor you're dealing with, but it could be, yeah.
Right.
Like I think it's the 14. I wish I had my Bible with me, but
yeah,
we have like 5 in the house.
yeah.
But
and so it was that's very much taught in the as a Baptist. And I think that the non-denominational is really truly just a Baptist.
It's Diet Baptist.
Diet Baptist, or yeah,
it's crazy.
Or you can have all the fun stuff, some of it, but yeah.
Yeah. Like Baptists with more football.
They literally show movies though. Like
they made a whole series of movies.
Night. Yeah. Of like cars just like all of a sudden just driving aimlessly with nobody in it and stuff because they got raptured and you're left behind, and then you have to figure out how to survive and then hopefully win your way to heaven.
Yeah.
In those 7 years.
If you're ever curious, go to your local Goodwill, because I guarantee you there's probably an entire multiple copies of the box set there. That's where I always see them now, is Goodwill. So if you're ever wondering, that's where that is.
That's so interesting. And oh my gosh, thinking about all the different religions and things like that of what kids are afraid of. I'm thinking in Mexico stuff, they're afraid of the chupacabra and things like that. And you guys are like, Mom, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm scared God's gonna leave 12-year-old Finn behind because he said a bad word or something. Oh my God.
But I really love that you said getting to know everyone and their cultures, because this is great. These kind of conversations are I could just listen to different cultures all day long and try to understand what they did and what their 12-year-old kids were afraid of. And I
from
love
the Baptist point of view, you basically ask Jesus in your heart to a million times, because maybe the first time didn't really work, or he didn't think
or you did something immediately after.
Exactly.
Yes. So you have to recommit your life to Christ over and over and over again. Yeah, it's
goodness, that's crazy. Now, so you have gone through and you've published and you've done through independent and a small press, correct?
Yes. So I'm currently independent, questioning that choice, but I think in the end it'll work out now that I understand what KDP wants from me when I'm making a cover. But yeah, so I originally went through 9 Star Press, which is a small indie press that worked with LGBT writers. And so that was my first series. I did 3 books of that. I stopped that because the Illuminati was just a bit too much at the time. And then I paused that, and then kind of had just went through kind of a dark night of the soul, had a little bit of a grippy sock vacation in there. And then, so when things finally settled back down, and I started seriously writing again, I was like, well, I think I want to redo this because I'm a whole different person now. I want to redo this series. I want to go in a different direction theme-wise. So yeah, that's when I started deciding I'm going to do an independent instead. And then I want to say about 2 years ago now, I attended a self-publishing seminar type deal here in Memphis. I've been here for 2 months. I was trying to make friends, and I went, and it was great. And Douglas Pratt, if you read tropical thrillers, he does tropical thrillers, and he's great. He's a well of information. He was very nice. But the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm like, fuck, I know most of this. Why am I not publishing? I can do this. I don't know what I'm waiting on. So that's kind of what got me to start actually going forth and publishing again. So yep, Demons and Museums is out, and then Angels and Exorcists comes out in about 3.5 weeks now.
That's exciting.
That's not cool. Yeah.
What do you feel like as going through a small press, which I imagine is different than, straight traditional press or publishing? What do you feel like is the difference or the major differences in which ones do you prefer, or have you preferred, even though you're not super far into the other one yet?
So I will say one nice thing about small press is they kind of hold your hand through kind of the more grueling parts. So my goal was just to write the book. So I wrote the book. They have editors on staff. They have, people who do the typography. They do the formatting. They do all of that. So as someone who was kind of not sure what the hell they were doing, especially because this was 8 years ago. So I don't think the information wasn't as readily available as it is now. That was really nice having that support. I will say I do much prefer the control that comes with indie as far as timelines, like what gets published when, who I can send arcs to. I just like having the control that comes with it, like being fully independent. But I think they're both. Hmm?
I was gonna say, and is it from your experience, is it a lot more work going indie, or is it,
It's a lot more work.
Yeah.
It's definitely, for better or worse. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but like you're in charge, like from just on a, behind the curtain wise, like you're in charge of your schedule. You're in charge of getting everything done. You're in charge of budgeting everything. You make all the decisions on what you're going to do with your cover, whether you're going to hire someone, who you're going to hire, what the theme is going to be. Do you want to go like what's on brand right now with the market, or do you want to go do something else? Like editing, how much are you going to edit? Who are you going to pay to edit? Like all that kind of stuff. All of that is on you. Whereas with a small press, all of that is kind of taken off your plate, and you can just focus on writing. It kind of just depends on what you want your focus to be and how far you want to go and how much control you want. I think is at the end of the day the big thing on what you
If you were to if you were to pick three of the biggest hurdles that you have experienced, learned, and overcome in doing it indie, what would those be?
Getting in my own, I think just myself, honestly. Getting in my own head. I think it's very easy to get in an echo chamber when you're an independent author of just like, hey, you have to be writing romantasy. You have to have the covers with all the models on them. You have to do this or you're not going to be successful or make it anywhere. And that can get into your head a lot. And kind of make you doubt yourself and what you're doing. And then also, I think the second one would be just time management. Just how much time do you want to dedicate to writing? How much do you want to dedicate to editing? What do you want those deadlines to look like? I mentioned at the start that like the main indie schedule that's kind of, I don't want to say pushed because no one's forcing us to do anything, but is encouraged to like do this as a full-time job is publishing like four books a year that are like about 50,000 words. And like I said, from the beginning, I had to draw a line in the sand and say, I'm not doing that. Like, it's not feasible. It's not why I want to create what I want to create. And so it's just thank you, but no thank you. And then third, I think is money. I don't think enough people take the time to think about financially what goes into publishing a book. Which was another reason I think the small press was a good choice at the time because I was flat broke. But with indie, it's like, okay, well, I got to figure out what I'm going to do for a cover artist. Like, how much do I have for editing? What do I have for software? Whether that's Atticus or Vela, I think is what's used by people who have Macs. And then if you want to put out arcs, like am I paying for Book Funnel? Am I paying for Book Sirens? Like, I think not enough people take the time to sit down and look at the financial side of publishing, and that trips them up either at the finish line or when they've been into a bit and they're kind of in the hole a bit without a really solid plan of how to get out of it.
Yeah, and then you turn around and you're selling, only a couple books a month, and you've just dropped,
Exactly.
2,000 plus.
Yep, absolutely.
And it can be a little devastating.
Right. So not only do you have like not great numbers, you also have a giant red number hanging over you.
Yeah. So marketing now is no longer like, hey, here's this cool book. It's like, hey, buy my book. I need to eat today.
Right. That's another thing. It's like sometimes, like, I fully plan to stick with my job at least another 5, 6 years. I might go longer than that, depending on just life and stuff. But that I'm doing that because that allows me the time to write on my schedule and gives me time to not burn myself out by,
That's
putting
funny.
out a million books. So I think that's also, I think because when we talked to Ariel, she talked about she worked at where she was working for what, 14 years before she went full time,
Yeah.
something like that. So that's
Yeah.
another reality. I think more people, most writers have day jobs.
Yes,
Um,
yeah. Well, and kind of like what you were saying though, like it does help knowing that if I needed to stop writing for 6 months, I can. And
right,
I can rely on my full-time job to pay my bills because I have that. And
right,
being full-time author, like I can imagine, I can just dream of how amazing it's going to be. But whenever I am a full-time author and I have to have books pumped out, on deadlines and things, that is so much more pressure, and I
absolutely.
imagine it would take away from what I enjoy right now is writing these stories when I feel like my creative
Right,
reservoir is
absolutely.
full.
I've definitely thought about that. I've kind of come to at the ripe old age of 32. I've kind of I've kind of made
Same.
peace with, yeah, I've kind of made peace with the fact that I might not ever write full time. And that's okay because it still allows me to write what I want to put out and what I want to leave behind. And I think that's more important than being able to do it full time. I
So
mean,
does that change maybe the storyline when you know you're not going to be putting out like I guess Cliffy's. So does it make it I don't know if the word is more essential to have them as a standalone rather than have cliffhangers and then because your readers aren't going to get a book, which is fine, but for
yeah,
months, maybe a year.
yeah. So I haven't looked at that as much as how some of it is how authors are advised to market their books, and then also just how I guess like trying to find that even if I was doing this full time, I'd have to find the happy space in the center of the Venn diagram that is telling the stories I want to tell and how it's best for the business side of things to tell these stories, which is why I started doing the novellas because that allows me to write more, but allows me to put out more books. But at the same time, like it's not taking that away from the story I want to tell because these are like little side stories, onesie twosies off that don't really impact the bigger story. Um, because they are like authors are always told, hey, make sure you're writing, like if you can, make sure you're writing a series. Make sure if you are writing standalones, make sure they're kind of in the same genre. Don't do like a shifter fated mates romance and then go off and do like a like crime noir. Like, don't do that
Yeah.
because those aren't going to be the same readers. I think that's more what drives my choices more so than having a full time job.
Well, and we know like Megan, like she's got like 7 different pen names because she enjoys writing so many different genres.
Mm-hmm.
So she can go
Right.
from doing that into another thing. But yeah, like if you write adult fantasy or spicy and you also write a YA, when those kids go look for your books online by your name, they're going to find all of them. So yeah, you do
Exactly.
have to be
I learned
careful.
that the hard way. Thanks a lot, James Patterson. Putting the Maximum Ride series under the same as all of his other stuff. 13-year-old Finn was not ready. Let me tell you.
But I mean,
Thanks,
even
dude.
like that, like it's not detrimental. Like it did not ruin him.
No, it didn't. It was James Patterson. You can't. I'm going to shut up.
That's fair. That's where he's up there.
Yeah, exactly. Let me shut up about Jen. But yeah, exactly. Like you got to be careful. Like with indie, you got to be more careful about that stuff because the industry is so new and it's evolving so quickly. Like
Oh, it's so
you don't
crazy.
have people, even newer folks. Like you just don't have people being accepted to the old guard of traditional publishing the way it used to. Like that is even if you
Yeah.
get it traditional, even if you get an agent, like that old way of doing stuff, I feel like it's done. I might be not for better or for worse. I think there's merit.
It's
in
just
both
like you
ways,
said,
but
evolving.
yeah,
It's going to look completely different, you know, even as agents or traditional press and all. It's just, it looks so different. And as it should, because everyone is realizing, oh, hey, I don't have to, you know, lock myself away in a house for a year to write a book and have no income and eat ramen noodles and be an
right.
author. Like, I can still do that as a mom who works a job and, you know, has kids and have all this other. So many people are like, there's a story inside of me and I want to tell it. And
Yeah, it's changing. It's, like even like I mentioned before, Chuck Tingle, like he's still every other week, he still puts out his erotica of just like romance by the unicorn billionaire or whatever the fuck, and it's great. But he'll also put out like award-winning like horror thrillers, like under his traditional. He signed with Tor Publishing and does that traditionally. So it's just really, the scene's changing is all.
I love it. I love it. So what you're working on? Okay, your one that's coming out in 3 weeks. That is your Angels and Demons.
Angels and Exorcists. Angels and Demons is Don Brown. Dan
Oh
Brown.
my gosh. Okay.
That's fine. I realized that in hindsight. I was like, I might have made a mistake. But yeah, so that is that comes out in 3 weeks, and then the novella comes out after that. Hopefully around the time of it'll be out in time for Valentine's Day. That'll be Sirens in Snow.
Now,
So
is this the second book to that series, the one that's coming out in a couple weeks?
Yeah, but that'll be one of the novellas. That'll be kind of a side story.
Gotcha. Okay. So what is if you were to do, and I hate doing this to authors because it is always putting us on the spotlight, so I'll talk for a minute so you can prepare, but what is the premise of like this world and the story that is this book that's going to be coming out? I know it's kind of going to go back into the first book a little bit, but just a generalized basis of like what people would get.
The novella or Angels and Exorcists?
Angels and Exorcists, because the novella is a piece of it, right?
Yeah, so Angels and Exorcists follows Miriam Bishop, who is a 21-year-old college student working in Detroit, Michigan, who has distanced herself from the supernatural religious organization that she was raised in. Discovers that one of her new neighbors is being haunted. So she kind of has to own up to and deal with a lot of the things she went through in this society in order to save him. And that's kind of the 30-second elevator pitch for that. And then Sirens and Snow follows Zachary and Emery's, who Emery's is in Angels and Exorcists. Demons and Museums is Zachary's backstory. It kind of follows them, and they have to go up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in winter because something is killing locals in a small town. So they have to, and they think it's fae rather than demonic. That's why Emery's has to help with it. So they have to learn to get along for more than 5 minutes to kind of solve this mystery and make sure no one else gets hurt.
So they're oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. These are romance. Are these romance? Is there romance in it?
There's like they're going to be there's romantic subplots. The novellas are going to be more romantic, like Siren Snow with Emery's and Zachary. That's going to be more romance heavy.
Now, those two characters, so it's already like established that they are already like hunters or like, you know, in the spiritual side of things, and that's what they do. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting. Oh, yeah. Because you guys were talking about possibly doing that as one of the book club books, and they were talking about the one that comes out in a couple weeks, right?
Yes. Yeah. If we do the book club, that'll be the one that comes out in October.
That's exciting. So okay. Oh, no, that's the same thing we just talked about. I was about to just repeat myself completely. The Rosary Rejects. That's what we just talked about, right?
Yeah,
I am going to repeat myself because I am so great at
No, wait, because I don't. The Rosary Rejects is what?
So the Rosary Rejects is the series. So Angels and Exorcists is the
first book. Gotcha.
Okay.
But they're standalones within that?
They're going to be a series. Like the novellas are kind of standalones, and then the series and then like Angels and Exorcists, and the next one after that. Those ones are going to be a series, and then the novellas are kind of standalones.
And do they end on cliffhangers, and so you have to read them?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to do my best not to end on cliffhangers, just because I know that's one of those things you're not supposed to do.
Gotcha.
So it'd be nice to kind of like end them on solid notes, if not like not complete endings, but at least a solid note.
So this is a series that you said was kind of inspired by Supernatural, correct?
Yeah, in part, definitely that. I can't remember what I was doing. I still like to watch Ghost Adventures, like when I crochet or whatever. Just the familiar rhythm of just how goofy it is. And so I was just watching it one day, and I was just like, why aren't they more like girl ghost hunters? Because they're usually dudes, and they're usually like big dude, like weird dude bros. Not weird, but just like dude bros. And so that's kind of where that started. That's kind of how that started in my brain, which is funny because it ends up Marion wants nothing to do with it in the beginning. So it's kind of funny that that's how it ended. But yeah, definitely a lot of supernatural energy, a lot of Good Omens energy. If you watch that, definitely in that, I think that genre, just a bit darker.
Now, did you feel like as you started writing this story, did you feel like this was just something you had to get out there? Like, was there an inspiration besides like, I enjoy these themes, so I'm going to write a book about it? Or was there something that was like, I feel like I need to get this out?
I think it was more the experimenting with the themes. I don't know. I'm not a huge, like, I have a story to tell. Like, I need to get this out there. Like, I get that a lot of people do that. And I wish I was one of those people because they seem way happier, way more charismatic. But no, it's more just playing with ideas and playing with themes is what I really like to do. And I like to put puzzles together. I'm learning. And that's all plotting is. It's just like you have the initial incident, you have the meet cute, whatever it is, you have the rising tension. I really like just putting those things together, basically around these questions and around these things. So the books kind of let me do that. And I mean, you saw me and Kathy had very similar experiences growing up afraid of the rapture. Like, I know I'm not the only queer kid that grew up in a fucked up church. Like, there's definitely people out there that I'm sure would like to hear that it's going to be okay.
And I think it's too, I love that, but not just, queer kids, but straight kids, like that are
Absolutely.
under that oppression of fear from this
Absolutely.
God who, like is just waiting for you to completely fuck up. And that's really just by saying the F word in some instances, So
one of my older,
I think you're doing a service that it's an even broader message that yes,
your pool is bigger than what you think.
Yes.
I appreciate that. No, my best friend back home, every time, she's like one of the only people I talk to in my hometown. Like, whenever we get together, it's always a process of, we kind of look at each other like, what the fuck was that? Like, whoa, what?
Like, high five, we made it.
Exactly. Like, I think the first time, it's funny because the first time we met up again after like not talking for years, I'd seen her mom like out somewhere. And again, I hadn't seen this girl in years, and she's like, "Oh, I'll tell her. You're in town." And I was like, "Try not to see anybody." And so she reached out. And we got coffee, and apparently she had like the same attitude. She was like, "Fuck," she's like, "He's gonna think I'm a failure, and he's gonna think all these things." And I was thinking the same stuff because I was in town with my then girlfriend before I was out as trans. So I'm walking my gay ass into the coffee shop, and we're both like, hey, we're actually really cool and we're really happy for each other because we're doing great. And we also just had that process of what the fuck did we go through? Like, what was that? So it's I think a lot of us are healing from that and trying to do better, whether that's in a faith community or outside of one. I think a lot of us are healing from that.
The way I picture your writing process, Finn, is that you have like these patches of like quilts, right? And then you stitch them together with human connection. And the patches are like the story plot. And then you are stitching them together with like human connection and stuff.
I appreciate that illustration because that is very much so what's going on.
Your new logo is just going to have to be a quilt.
a quilt. But
I'm gonna have to do it.
I also think it's super important because I don't think that you realize that you can also be reaching other people outside of maybe the queer community, right? Like it. I hope that you just saw
Yeah.
that, you know, that
I
someone
really
in that community still experience so many of the same things, and we still have like that's at 6 degrees of separation, right? Like we still have that same thing in common of this overarching, you know, religious fear.
yes, absolutely, because I did like regardless of what like regardless of being a guy now, like because everybody has a different relationship to their gender, but I absolutely grew up as a girl in the height of what I would say is like the height or like just the slow beginning of the I guess the depopularity of the purity movement, and that was not fun. That was really
the depopulation of the what movement?
or the deep like popularization of the purity movement, where there was actually really big emphasis on virginity and just being a very small, tight cast of girl to be desirable, to be wantable. And I know that a lot of, and not just me, I know that a lot of cis girls went through that like right with me. Like I get that. I know there's a lot of cis girls that still go through it, and it's bullshit. And I think that's one of the reasons, like regardless of her orientation, I think that's why Miriam, the main character, is so loud and boisterous and just she's a lot. Like trauma aside, she's just a loose cannon, and I love that about her. But I think a lot of that was in response to that, just expecting to be a certain way, and it's just not. If it's just not in your makeup, it's they kind of throw up their hands, and they're like, oh well, guess God hates you. Like
He
because they don't
made
have
you, but you're a fuck up.
exactly. It's like, oh, it's just better luck next time, I guess. Fuck you. So yeah, Kathy, highly recommend if you're into music at all, Candy Carpenter. She grew up. Her pastor was an her pastor. Her dad was an evangelical pastor, so now she makes music processing that shit. Highly recommend. It's so good.
Okay.
It has like slight. It's kind of got like early 2000s like pop rock vibes to it. Meets I was gonna say Avril Lavigne, but that's pop rock. But yeah, just either way, just highly recommend Candy Carpenter. She's a trip. Her album's really good. It's definitely on the Angels and Exorcists soundtrack. So there's also that.
Amazing.
Finn, if anyone wants to connect with you or read your books or get on the train of, things that are coming out, where can they find you on social media and things like that?
So I am on most of the things. I am on Facebook, well, pretty much all the things except Twitter. Um, under Finnely Ray or author Finnely Ray. That's my username on all the things. TikTok's a good place to find me because they have memes that move now in the form of videos, so that's fun. So that's where I am. Follow me, DM me, whatever. Just don't make it weird, I guess. And yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
He's gonna ignore you.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I said DM because I'm thinking like, oh, author advice and stuff. That I'm like, I shouldn't actually offer that because it's the internet.
Yeah, you be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. I was like, oh no,
We have a Discord that has many different authors and a great community for that kind of advice.
Yes,
Exactly.
message me in the public forums of the Discord where there are witnesses. That's where you should be.
Yeah. What about your book? Now, the traditional ones, is everything available on Amazon or?
The small press, those are no longer available.
Oh, you're redoing them. Gotcha. I forgot.
I am redoing. Yeah, those are like from the ground up being redone. So the only ones available are Demons and Museums, which is available through KU, and Angels and Exorcists will be out October 4th. ARCs are available. So yes, in the very public form of Discord, ask for an ARC. I am giving them out very liberally because I need reviews. So yeah, hit me up.
Awesome. Finn, you were amazing. I was so excited about this episode and you knocked it out of the park. So thank you so much for being on.
I am glad. I was very nervous, so I'm glad it was fun.
I noticed you weren't knitting, so you weren't as nervous as what you thought you were.
I guess. I was twirling my pen like the entire time.
Fine.
So, but yeah, because I looked back at Ariel's episode and I was like, I look like a fucking nut. Just like, what am I doing in that video? I'm gonna try to be better about that.
You're good. I knew what you're doing. And it's this whole process. I love having people on and kind of seeing their growth too, because you start off knitting on your first episode because you were anxious about being on there, and now this one you're already not. So you're doing.
Yeah.
The growth is going to be amazing.
Yeah, we're working on it. We're getting there.
I'm working on it.
I think that's a great. I love that though, because hopefully you felt comfortable. So our podcast maybe is a little bit different, where we do try to, just have it more of a conversation style rather than we have all of these questions that we're going to ask you and we want answers to all of these questions. That's really not
all the answers.
I mean, we have like a general map that we'd like to stay in the same country to go by, but I loved the conversation.
Yeah, no, it was great.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Lemon's Listening Library. Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this episode of Lemon's Listening Library. Remember, every story has a journey, and every journey deserves to be heard. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep listening,